Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, and here with me today to help wake the world up to what's possible for healing are some of the authors of a new book that we have coming out. This one is called The Caregiver's Advocate, a complete guide to support and resources. Before I introduce the authors to you today, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our lead author, Debbie DeMoss Compton. Debbie, thank you so much for guiding this project, for being here to do this, for stepping up with such a big mission and vision for what this is and this very important topic of caregiving and for caregivers. We wouldn't be here without you, girl. So I'm so honored and grateful to be here doing this project with the stellar group of authors you put together, experts in this field to help people. You're about to hear from some of them, you guys. So Amy Friesen is an award-winning and widely recognized luminary in senior living, is celebrated for her roles as a best-selling author, educator, and expert. Brenda Freed is with us. She's the co-creator of the Mackenzie Meets Alzheimer's Awareness Program and Mackenzie Meets Alzheimer's Disease Picture Book, designed to educate children and their families about Alzheimer's disease. Michael Lewis is the Chief Behavior Officer at Family Legacy Financial Services, a leading provider of retirement, estate, investment, and tax planning. They're based in Cary, North Carolina, with clients nationwide. And Veronica Scheers is a certified end-of-life doula. She supports her clients and their families from the initial terminal diagnosis through the dying process. Veronica, you're going to start our party off today. Tell us about your amazing chapter.
Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. My name is Veronica. I am a 40-year registered nurse. I'm still practicing, and I am the proud writer and grateful to have been invited by Debbie and Laura to contribute to this amazing book. My chapter is chapter 21, Hospice and the End-of-Life Doula. Because the idea of a doula is to collaborate with hospice. Although I don't need to be called as late as hospice does, an end-of-life doula can come from the minute you hear you have a terminal diagnosis, and or the family is seeing decline. And that's when a doula can step in and start getting the wheels rolling. There are many beautiful things that can be accomplished in that precious time. And it would be best to, in my opinion, their hospice doesn't do quite as much as it could because it's restrained by insurance, and doulas can fill that gap. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm proud to be able to be a doula for those in my surroundings.
Thank you for starting us off with this particular topic. I think I lived most of my life not even really knowing what an end-of-life doula or a death doula was. Like you're used to hearing birth doula. And, you know, as a young person, and especially somebody who had a couple of kids, and being a healer, right? But even in that realm, the end of life doula was something I learned about much later on. What do you want everyone to know, but even maybe those younger people to know about this, and how important it is?
So just as a birth doula prepares for the birth of the baby, an end-of-life doula prepares you for the passing process. You and your loved ones are all included in the plan. I advocate for the person actually dying so that they can communicate their wishes and have them adhered to a little bit more responsibly. And so just like you prepare a nursery, well, you need to prepare a dying situation. So is your mortuary in your plan yet? Let's get your mortuary, what process you want. There are not a million, there are about a dozen different options now that weren't available before. And Laura, you haven't heard of an end-of-life doula because we're a new system that came into being within the last, I'd say, 25 to 30 years.
Mm.
So that's why yeah, a lot of people haven't heard of us yet. And so it's situations like this where I can educate that makes all the difference for our work as all the doulas, not just as me.
You know, so you said from the moment somebody has a diagnosis, I mean, how wonderful for somebody like you to step in. And it's just making me wonder, like, how do you even approach that it's such a sensitive topic, and this could be so proactive for people to have this kind of support. How do you go there in those first couple hours, days?
The goal is to come in from where they are. So you can, a client can get their diagnosis, they can be in total denial, total denial. And that's part of the stages of the process of dying. You can stay in denial all the way up to the day you die and take your last breath. But everyone else around you can try and support you in spite of your denial. Because it's best to be prepared. And it's best to be able to support the loved ones. It doesn't have to be your immediate family, it's your chosen family. Anybody that's there that's trying to support you through the end stages of your life need that support too. And so that's what I'm there for. I'm supporting you as the passing person, but I'm supporting your family because they're part of the whole. And it's best to have them included. They feel better when the process is all over. Their loved one hasn't been in pain. Their loved one has had attention. They had somebody at the bedside when they couldn't be there. That's what a death doula does. If you need to go out, you've been at the bedside for way too long. You need to go out. You just need a cup of coffee away from the house. Your hospice isn't going to necessarily come and give you that relief. And that's what a death doula can do.
Mm.
I can step in, I can be at the bedside, I can be the comfort, I can be the observer, the warm hands that will cover when you can't. And for that I'm blessed.
I love the difference that you just gave me a little aha about. Veronica, thank you so much for saying yes to this project, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Laura. We'll talk more.
We will. Michael, tell us about your amazing chapter.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Lewis, Chief Behavioral Officer for Family Legacy Financial Solutions. The chapter that I wrote is called The Art of Financial Self-Defense, Strategies to Protect the Elderly from Exploitation. Now, when I was invited into this project, I had no idea what I was going to actually write about until I started sharing experiences with people in my generation who are all going through, unfortunately, the elder generation is starting to pass away, and with it becomes a whole plethora of problems, some of which Veronica just talked about. And my perspective is more from the money side. Now, I know that sounds cold and heartless, but the fact is, when you look at what goes on with the elderly and people talk about caregiving, more often than not, it's about emotional caregiving or medical caregiving. And it's all incredibly important. You want to make the person comfortable. But there is also an obligation to the next generation to make sure that you protect the finances. And as someone gets elderly, they become more susceptible to fraud. And we all think of fraud from a computer perspective, a pop-up screen or what have you. But in fact, fraud comes from many different places, including people that you knew and trusted for a very, very long time. And it doesn't take much for somebody who has bad intentions to get a hold of your money. And as a financial caregiver, our responsibility to that generation is to make sure that their finances are protected, that their household continues to operate efficiently without pause, and that the next generation knows, again, what Veronica talked about. They know what's coming, and by doing it correctly, you can avoid a lot of confrontation and fights that split families apart, after the one that you're looking after passes.
So I've had a personal experience with what we were calling elder abuse quite a while ago now, with a great aunt whose financial advisor was literally showing up at the hospital, trying to get her to sign papers. And it was quite scary to me at the time, not really having a professional like you, Michael, by my side to educate. So I think this particular discussion about finances is so important. And actually, I think it's the opposite of heartless topic, because when you're protected with resources like that for your own care to the end of life, I mean, that matters. And people do, of course, try to take advantage a lot of the time, but this education, I think, is really important. What's the thing you want people to know in terms of looking at that picture from the outside? Are there ways we can see the red flags before they're too red?
No, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. And it comes from paying attention, being aware. The best example I can give is, if you have somebody who's caring for another, one recommendation I make is start keeping a log of who attends, right? Because what happens when people find out that someone's close to end of life, it presents an opportunity. And Lord knows we can all talk about stress and what it does to people, but what it does do is it makes them do desperate things if there's enough stress involved, and the people that you trusted can no longer be trusted. So whether it's the crazy uncle that you haven't heard from in months now all of a sudden is showing up every day to the door, that's a red flag. Also look for changes in behavior. If you're if one of the sons has always been dapperly dressed and all of a sudden he's becoming much more disheveled, that might be a red flag that maybe he's having some kind of financial problems. In the end, the financial caregiver must be not only attentive, but he also has to be very communicative, right? Having a problem needs to be shared. You can't expect that person to deal with it all on his own. In the end, it's a family problem, which requires a family solution. Just so happens that the financial caregiver is being given a certain level of responsibility. So, you talk about red flags. You also better be careful about who you assign to do the financial caregiving, because if it's that crazy uncle that you just happen to pick because he's local, right? And local does not necessarily mean that's the right qualification to do the job. Well, you're giving somebody, a temptation that they may not be able to what's the word I'm looking for? Withhold,
Yeah,
I apologize.
they can't pass up.
They can't pass up.
Yeah.
And they're in a position now where they actually have access to a tremendous amount of money, and the person whose one signature can change the course of their legacy going forward. So look for changes in behavior.
Yeah, really, really good. Michael, thank you for being here and really just addressing that important topic. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure being part of this project.
There's we're going to be interviewing Susie Thompson coming up. There's one other author, and Michael's making me think of something that ties into her chapter as well. She was saying, hey, so that you aren't going crazy about things, write things down. Who is showing up? What is happening? What you did for the person that day. Michael is saying the same things, write these things down, pay attention, mark it down for yourself, because when it's all up in your own head, sometimes that's tough. But I like that we're giving people some of these ideas in terms of how to be careful about the journey. Amy, tell us about your amazing chapter.
Thanks, Laura. I'm Amy Friesen, and I coach caregivers on how to have awkward conversations, on how to make a plan. My chapter is called When It's Time for the Talk, Turn Awkward Conversations into Actionable Elder Care Planning. And if you would, come on a journey with me for a minute and picture that your dad lives 8 hours away. And although you get to see him every once in a while, a couple times a year, his health starts to fail and then he needs more assistance. But you have a life, you have children, you have cats and dogs and jobs. And it's really difficult. So, the best option is for him to come closer. And how do you talk about it? Because he doesn't want to. And that was our situation, as well as, like I said, I coach a lot of caregivers. So, how do you have that living arrangements talk? And honestly, from the legal talk to conversations about end of life planning, the question is how do you have to talk in a positive and influential way that respects your loved one while also getting them the help they require, but also simultaneously caring for your own self, which is always very difficult for many, if not all, caregivers. So that's what this chapter is all about. It's how to set yourself up in the best way possible for these difficult and usually awkward conversations. And then in the chapter, I also talk about the emotional aspects of the impeding health crisis, as well as the talk must have. So after reading this chapter, caregivers and families will be able to more successfully step into these conversations in a way that's respectful and honors what is important for both.
Every single interview I've had so far, respect comes up. So it's being repeated again today. And I think your topic is so important. All of your topics are so important. The conversations, the communication is one of those foundational important topics that is going to really help, I believe. But gosh, this is not easy, is it, Amy?
It never is, and it's always awkward. I have to say, it's just getting into the conversations seem to be more awkward than not.
So, here I am, and I know that I need to have one of these kinds of conversations, and I'm feeling that feeling inside of me that I don't want to do this. This does not feel good. I don't know how I'm going to say it. Do you have an opener for me that would help? And, my loved one is there. I would imagine you would also advise that it's not just the two of us, that there might be another person, another trusted person in the room. I don't know. Give me an opener.
I would say just before the opener, make sure that you're right with and straight with what you need and what is the actual situation. What are you going to talk about? Because sometimes people go into these conversations and they think they're going to talk about finance and they end up in 12 different conversations. So really kind of get right with yourself. What's the one talk we're going to have right now? And then I think it's really important to say and plan for, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, whomever, I'm having concerns about this. I'd really love to talk. Could we set up a time, at this date? Let's do lunch. I'll bring it over just to have a conversation. Because planning that's important because they need to get their heads around it as well. But also let them know that like you also find this awkward. It's difficult and we're on the same page and we're on the same team. Let's work through it together.
Yeah, I love that. That puts a little bit of the control into their court, and that is respectful. Setting up the meeting. It's not just like you're not going to barge in and just have a conversation. I think that's really, really, really good advice. I think we have such fear about having these conversations. We love our people and we don't want to bum them out by having these, they're not just awkward, they're topics nobody wants to talk about. And so, right. Any last thing about that? Any other tip you want to give?
I think that also just to be easy on yourself as a caregiver, because honestly, a lot of us are actually sandwich generation caregivers. And so we're having awkward conversations on both sides. We're having birds and the bees, and we're having these elder care conversations. Give yourself a break, understand that they're just a part of life, and just give yourself some prep time so that you understand where your needs are so that you can express that properly.
Yes, that's brilliant. Amy, thank you so much for saying yes to this project and for being here today.
My pleasure.
I'm a little bit in the I'm the meat in the sandwich. I'm in between. I'm like, I've got except for my kids are adults, but you know how that goes too. Like there's conversations over there, there's conversations over here with, my parents, but oh my goodness, what fun. Okay. Brenda, tell us about your amazing chapter. And let me get you to unmute, Brenda.
Hi, I'm Brenda Freed, and I contributed chapter 10 to this wonderful book. My chapter is The Alzheimer's Conversation, Why and How to Include Children. I wanted to write about this because so many people don't include their children in the care or just even explaining to them what's happening to their loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia. So I wanted to give people ideas on how to explain it and how to include the children.
Oh, it's such a beautiful topic, and this ability to do what you're talking about will make such a difference in everyone involved's lives in terms of just, I think, the wisdom of life and being involved in this process that is scary. And so I guess tell us what you would say about the ages and how to approach maybe, a kid who's very young versus maybe a kid who's a little bit older and who can handle something more. You know what I'm getting at there?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I co-created with Alder Allensworth the Mackenzie Meets Alzheimer's Awareness Program and the Mackenzie Meets Alzheimer's Disease picture book, which addresses exactly what you've asked. The picture book comes with a download of a song. We wrote a story song about a young girl who has a relationship with her grandmother and then learns the grandmother has Alzheimer's and what kinds of things to expect. So we go into quite a lot of detail just in the song, but it's presented in a way that's very gentle. So I would say for children like 4 years old and under, there are many books available, and ours is one of them, that help introduce Alzheimer's to children. And the thing that makes ours unique is the song aspect. So a person can, they can sing along with the song. It has a really easy sing along chorus, but it's just a gentle way of introducing Alzheimer's or any type of dementia to young children. And then we found the need. Our program is basically based on my co-author's, co-creator Alder Allensworth experience of her mother having Alzheimer's and the grandchildren would come visit. And there was an incident that happened, and the young girl who was 7 got very upset with her gran about something that was missing. And they had to try to explain to the grandchild, she didn't, gran did not mean to be mean or to steal from you. They had to try to explain how Alzheimer's affects the mind. And so we have created a video on what is Alzheimer's in relation to what it takes to go get a glass of milk, for example, all the different steps involved in going to get that glass of milk. And at any point during that process, that thought process of going to the cupboard, getting the glass, finding the refrigerator, at any point that process can be interrupted and the person doesn't get their need met. So for children like between 4 and 10, the program goes through and talks about different activities one can do in different stages of Alzheimer's. And we try to help those children participate in the care and just understand that the word respect comes up, that these people need to be respected and treated with dignity. And also it's important because children who aren't exposed to their loved one who has the disease often grow up with no memories of that person. And we're trying to encourage people to help their children interact and have successful interactions with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia so that they have at least some memories. And we know that during an activity with someone who has Alzheimer's, positive memories are created. And there is joy involved if we get them involved.
Yeah, how beautiful. You're describing your education for even that older set of kids. And I'm thinking that's good for adults to understand. It's like that's good for everybody to understand that thing that's going on, because it just gives you another level of awareness when you're interacting and connecting with people. So that's brilliant.
It is, I mean, we have had adults even get our program because the information is presented in a way that's appealing to children, but the information is relevant to everyone.
Yes, oh, no doubt. Brenda, thank you for being here and for saying yes to this project. Y'all are such badasses, honestly. I have a huge thank you to all of you because you're really master teachers and experts at what you do. And it's quite one thing to, do it with your clients and the people that you're serving every day, but it's another challenge I gave you to put it in black and white in a book in a way that people can really get that effective, practical result, right? And that's what this book is to our listeners. Our authors are offering their very vulnerable, amazing stories, but then you're going to get tools and resources like never before for caregiving. And I'm so grateful to all of you for doing that in this book. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you for this next question. What's the most important thing you want people to know about caregiving? It's a big question, which has 100 million answers, but if you were to choose one, what would it be?
When it comes to financial caregiving, which is very similar, but in some ways the skill set is completely different than most of the other skills that we've talked about. I would say the most important thing is make sure you pick the right person, right? He should be qualified. You should be trusted. And make sure that everybody on your team, and when I talk about your team, you talk about your doctors, but other family members, understand what their role in relationship is. We talked a lot, and all these great authors all mentioned about the importance of communication. And when you think about what a financial caregiver is, it is taking the information that's coming from all sorts of different sources, bank accounts, web statements, mail, has to be processed, has to be dealt with in a timely manner. That person has to be trusted. But that person can't do it alone, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, that person is overseeing the financial legacy of probably more than one person. And therefore, you have a lot of people who have a vested interest to make sure this is done correctly. The best thing you can do is start by picking the right person to do the financial caregiving, because at the end of the day, bills need to be paid, mortgages need to be paid, retirement. I mean, there's all sorts of financial obligations that someone has to fill. And if you don't do it correctly, there are penalties. There's loss of monies. There could be loss of houses, loss of property, and also loss of time. I mean, at the end of the day, we know we're all dealing with a finite period of time that's left. We talk about signing papers. Well, in order to sign papers, the person who's signing them has to be mentally capable of signing them, and you have to be aware of all these things before you get into it. And I know there's someone who wrote a chapter on estate planning, incredibly important, right? Because if you're going to make the changes necessary and you need a signature, then that person has to be in a position to do it. So my message to those who are listening is, please don't pick a financial caregiver because you like him or he happens to be local, because the responsibilities and the penalties associated for doing this wrong can really destroy a family's legacy. Make sure you pick the right person, and make sure that everybody who has a vested interest is part of the process.
Cool. I would imagine you would agree with me when I say, get great recommendations if you can, and interview more than one person at a minimum. And right, it's not just because you like the guy or they're your friend or whatever it is. So I love that advice.
Yeah, and I'll add one other thing too. When it comes to finances, maybe a family member isn't the right person to do it. Maybe the temptation is too much, and therefore maybe you should consider getting a professional who's going to be a fiduciary, but also going to be emotionally detached, as it were, so he's not going to succumb to those stresses that other family members might when they're dealing with access to other people's money.
I agree with you on that one, 200%, having gone through a couple of experiences. All right, Amy, how about you on this big question? What's the most important thing you want people to know about caregiving?
I would say to know that burnout is real and that you always need to shield yourself from caregiver burnout, and it sneaks up on you very, very quickly. So to put things in place that make sure when you're caring for someone else that you've already taken care of your needs or you've mapped out your boundaries so that you know what you can do and what you can't do, and step into that. Don't feel bad about it. Everyone has only one life, and you also deserve to have a fulfilling life that you're not burnt out and stressed over all the time. And so make sure that you put those steps in place.
Yes, I love that one. I'm actually going to be asking all of you a question that relates to that one in just a minute. So important. And that topic has come up in every single interview, almost with every single author. Self-care, self-care. So like, let's take care of ourselves. It's the whole oxygen mask on the plane idea. And we say it so much, I think it just gets old in that. And but really it gets said a lot because it's important.
Well, it's also because people can visualize that.
Yes.
A lot of people have been on planes, they understand that, but some people are first-time caregivers and they walk in and then all of a sudden they're doing hours and hours and hours every week or every day, and they just get overwhelmed and overtaken by it. And so if you can give people something to visualize that they're very familiar with, then they can relate that a little easier.
Yes, that's a great point. Great point. All right, Brenda, how about you? What's the most important thing you want people to know about caregiving?
I think education and preparation. When children are involved, I think it's really important to prepare them, and like they have fears. And so to alleviate those, explain that, Alzheimer's isn't something that they can catch. They're not going to get it. And that they can still enjoy and have fun with their loved one. These things might change, activities might change, and to explain to them, just as a real broad example, for example, if they're used to playing chess with the person, they might have to go to checkers. And I think that's huge, so that they won't be afraid. And also it teaches them compassion. And what we need right now is a more compassionate society anyway. So children who are involved in caretaking and know about Alzheimer's and dementia, they're less likely to fall into bullying roles because they are more educated about, each of us, we're each unique individuals, and to treat everyone with respect and dignity, no matter of the cognitive abilities.
Yes, this is really important. I listened to someone else relate this to leprosy. Like that's how people react. And it's like, wait a minute, we need a little more education here, All right, Veronica, what's the most important thing you want people to know about caregiving?
So an end-of-life doula can step in when, like Amy said, the overwhelm comes. So we can be your advocate during the overwhelm so that you're still feeling love and care for your loved one in their precious time without building up, getting the burnout, without, don't be afraid to reach out when you're the caregiver. There are resources out there. Search for them, reach out, and always know that someone's got your back. And that's what I'd like caregivers to know.
Yeah, really, really important. Oh my gosh, y'all are examples of the community that people are going to have in this. And, nobody's alone anymore. This is what's been coming up a lot too. You never have to feel alone again. That's so important. So Amy, I'm going to start with you on this next question. So this one, here you are living your life, and maybe you are that example of you have kids you're taking care of, you're working, there might be pets in the house, you've got this life going on, and all of a sudden caregiving gets dropped in your lap unexpectedly, right? We're not talking about something that you could have forecasted or whatever, and you're hit with this situation. And I would imagine that somebody really has to assess, like, if they're sitting there going, oh my gosh, I can't do this, or I am not the right person to be in this role. And there's big, big issues, resistance, problems with that situation. What advice do you have for somebody in that situation? What's the first step?
I think something you just touched on as well is I think that it's important to understand if it's in your wheelhouse in the first place, right? There's a lot of caregivers that get thrust into something, and it's like you said, it's unexpected sometimes, a diagnosis or something, an accident, and they get thrust in. And sure, we put out the fires, but then I think that you really need to consider, is this your role? And is this your role in life? And you need to be okay and understand that it might not be. I speak with a lot of caregivers that get thrown into these situations that it just doesn't come natural to them. And so I think one of the first things to do is analyze what is, is it going to work? And then reach out for help and talk to people about it. And also talk to the community, right? Co-workers and things like that, because there's a lot of people that are already dealing with this stuff that they just don't talk about. And so I think that one of the things that really happens a lot is people feel isolated and alone. And I tell you, after 20 years working with caregivers, you're not alone. Your situation is very similar. It's just that people don't talk about it. And the second that you give any open door to that communication, you'll see that you're not alone. And I think that that's a really nice step to take.
Yes, really good. Really, really good. Connect, so that you don't have to sit in that overwhelm by yourself. Yeah. Brenda, how about you? What would your advice be in that situation? You have the situation unexpectedly, you don't know what to do. You don't feel, and I think I need to add in here, sometimes we're assuming that this person can afford the care, which many people cannot afford. So that's a whole nother problem. But what would you say, Brenda?
First of all, educate yourself about the situation, because in relation to my chapter, one can't talk to children about Alzheimer's if they don't know about it themselves. So educate yourself, and then be able to translate that into terms that children can understand, and explain it to them in terms they can understand, so that it just alleviates their questions and fears, and give them tools to interact. And therefore, the person who's giving those tools needs to have tools themselves.
Yeah, that's really, it's great for lots of different kinds of people. Just educate yourself first, and slow down, take that deep breath, educate yourself first, learn more about it, no matter who you are or who you're helping, right? The kids or otherwise. I love that. Veronica, how about you? What would your words be of advice for that situation? Right? We weren't expecting it. We're not exactly sure what to do. What would you tell them?
There are many times when a terminal diagnosis comes way, way from left field. And just like Brenda said, educate. Get the background on what to expect. Look for the people that can be your resources and your support. Be open. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Death is a word that just, I announced my new career to my family. I'm a certified end-of-life doula. And my family went, why would you say end of life? why would you say you're a death doula? It's like, because guess what? You're gonna die someday. It's not a guarantee that you'll be here for a millennium. And so our society has taken death out of many, many conversations. And being someone that works around it all the time, I can step into those conversations and be a resource and have, like Amy, have those difficult discussions. There are many, many. I went to a client and her daughter had tried for 20 years to get her a funeral plan. The mother had refused, and I'm at the death bedside trying to grapple with finding where to put mom. That's not, personally, that's not a really fair thing to do to your kids. So step in, step in, step up, read what Michael's got to say, and be prepared, because overwhelm can come on so easily, and scared over prepared. That's my motto. Prepared over scared, excuse me. Yeah.
Prepared over scared. Yes, 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 yes. You're also giving me an opportunity to do a quick shout out for Hamali Vora, who was the lead in our Sacred Death book. And so when we start to change language around death and help people understand that this is a sacred time of life, then it changes. And I think people will, going back to Amy's, awkward conversations, then it becomes something sacred conversation. Like, ooh, look at that flip, right? That's a good thing. Michael, what would your 2 cents be on this? It was an unexpected thing. I'm overwhelmed instantly. I really don't know what to do, and I don't know that this is my role. What are your words of advice there?
Everybody in this panel talked about the importance of communication. And I think you have to understand, and I'm sure most people do, that you're not doing this alone, although some people feel the need to do it alone. Now, sometimes we get caught up in the stigma of sharing what's going on with others. We don't want to talk about it. And, we've talked a lot about end of life, but, there are circumstances where you're not even close to end of life and you're still doing financial caregiving for somebody, and it still comes as a surprise. It could very well be substance use disorder, which I have personal experience in, but you're doing financial caregiving for that. And you're right. You wake up one morning and you're dealing with a whole new reality. And the first thing you have to do is come to grips with the fact that things have changed and they're never going back, never going back. So you can look backwards all you want and try to figure out, why did it happen? What was me? But really what's important is trying to figure out what's your way forward. And there are some skills that you can learn. And this book is going to give you tons of information to help you learn what you need to learn. But there are some skills that you are never going to be able to learn. There are people here who have trained a lifetime to deliver the skills and help necessary to get you through this last, or not even last, but this next stage of your life and your responsibility. Ask for help. I think the worst thing that anybody can do is try to figure this out on their own. There's just too many moving parts. And I'm coming at it from the financial perspective, but we've heard from all these other great authors, contributors to the book, talking about specifically how it impacts your health, your psychology, and all of this impacts your ability to make decisions. So if it comes on you by surprise, which I would say 9 times out of 10 it probably does, don't just react. You really do need to take a deep breath and go, what's going on here? Call your other family members together and have that discussion that, Amy talked about. It's important to come to grips with what is going on, and make sure everybody understands it. The relative who lives 5,000 miles away may never have heard of any of this. And, it's going to come as a surprise. So having these conversations is important, but ask for help. No one expects you to do this alone.
Ask for help. And so you're bringing up something else. I'll bring it up again too. I had this great visual just now as Michael was talking of the first conversation, and Michael and Amy and Veronica and Brenda are all there in the room with you, helping you, like helping you do the thing, right? Like, how incredible would it be to have a panel of experts in that moment that, and Brenda's helping the kids and Amy's like, this is an awkward conversation, but we can do it. And I just, Veronica's like, death, like, we need to talk about it. Like, it's okay. And Michael's like, yeah, and money too. Like, I mean, so this is life, right? You guys are so awesome. And the way that you come together for this topic is it just makes me smile. You guys are all amazing. And this isn't just for people with dementia or elderly people or some of the people that we're talking about, Alzheimer's. This is a mom who has 3 kids. This is anyone who cares for someone who might be in overwhelm from their caring or from their duties or obligations. And then they've got some other big problem that happens, and that is quite the thing, right? So it gets me to this last question for all of you, and you've all been touching on it already. Brenda, how do you take care of yourself? Like, what's your go-to self-care tool? What do you love to do?
My self-care tool is going outside, being outside. I live on a ranch, so I love hauling brush around and moving rocks around, and it's something I have to do every day. And when I don't do it, sometimes I find myself out there at 8 o'clock, right before it's getting dark now, to just have that peace of mind outside in nature. That is my comfort zone right there.
I'll be walking there with you too, girl. I love it. I just wrote a little post about the fireflies. So that's nighttime, but the summer firefly, like, oh yes, like, get my feet in the grass. Veronica, how about you? Tell us what your self-care moment is.
So my self-care revolves around a few things. One of them is that I have a very large support circle that feeds me emotionally on a lot of different levels. Part of my self-care comes as I'm arriving at someone's house to give care. I take the few minutes before I'm scheduled to be there just to bring myself into the moment and push everything out of it so that I can come in grounded and ready to serve. And I'm a proponent of adult coloring books. They can take a bunch of stress out of whatever's going on. That and some good meditation tapes that I can just push a button, lay back, let somebody help let loose the squirrels. And that's my caregiving.
I love it.
Spots.
I love those so much. Did y'all catch I'm going to call it a master level energy practice that Veronica talked about before she goes into the home? So you all can take that nugget for a minute, and you can think about, before you work with your client, before you're caregiving with your own kids, before you go into the house where you're going to be doing this sacred service. And, I think that's super important. So I just wanted to kind of say that again, like, wow, yeah, if you're taking responsibility for your own energy before the thing, you're golden, I think. Michael, what's the way that you like to take care of yourself?
Well, we're all in the business of taking care of others, and that could be incredibly selfless, as my clients are probably the most selfless people I've ever met. They always putting somebody else in front of their own needs, right? Which is a real problem, of which I plead guilty to. But I have since recognized that if I don't take care of myself, i.e. the airplane, put the mask on first, then I can't take care of anybody else. And I recently discovered the use of sensory deprivation tanks. This is it's like floating in the Dead Sea. You're alone with yourself and your thoughts for an hour. Not for everybody, but for me, it just allowed me to unplug from the rest of the world. So I have no telephone, I have no TV, no internet. It's me alone with my thoughts. And I have found that when I do this on a regular basis, I'm more relaxed, I become more focused, and it allows me to do the one thing that people classify as selfish, but that's take care of myself. And you know what? If I can take a couple of hours a week just to be by myself, I can see no bad that comes from that. So you got to take care of yourself, whether it's yoga, reading, hobbies, or whatever. All I would just encourage everybody is make time for yourself. We're all so busy trying to make time for other people's needs that we ignore ourselves. So don't.
Yeah, exactly. Don't. The sensory deprivation tanks, y'all. They've got one here in my town. The company is called Hope Floats. And I would love giving them a shout out because that has been the most peaceful, serene, amazing meditative time I've done too, Michael. Like I am with you there on that modality of stillness. Fantastic for somebody said it earlier, the squirrel brain. Amy, you're going to close us out today. Tell us about that way that you love to take care of yourself.
Well, I've got a couple. It depends on the situation, but I try to include breaks throughout the day. I have a hypersensitive personality, and I've realized that if I'm overstimulated or if there's too many things or too many stressors, I just need to walk away and just take time, just whatever I'm doing, if I'm reading or watching a show or whatever that is, but away from people. It's too people-y. So I do that because I just need my own space as an introvert. And then the other thing, if stress is really building up, then I will take a moment to scream at the top of my lungs, whether it's in a car, in my house, outside, or wherever it is. And that releases some of that pent up energy that people forget is there. And if you can just scream, I scream swear words, but if you can just scream, then it just like takes it down a notch. And I find that's really helpful too.
It's so therapeutic. I'm with you in the car, mostly with the windows rolled up and really loud music playing. Like that's the place I feel the least amount of guilt for screaming.
We're singing along really loudly, right?
Yes.
Like I put on some metal and I'll just sing along really loudly and just releases that a little bit of the pent up energy.
It does. It's an energy shifter. That she's right about that. And if you can shift your energy in a moment where you're stressed, you got it. And there's a million ways. We could have given you all 100 more ideas for this self-care, this moment of shifting your energy, right? To nourish mind, body, soul. Authors, expert authors for the Caregivers Advocate. Thank you so much for what you do in the world. And thank you for being here today, you guys, to share it with everyone. Thanks. So, to our listeners today, this is so much more than a book. This is a generous community. So if you heard something today, gave you the goosebumps, maybe you have a question or you need support, we have a community of people. You're staring at 4 of them who are ready to answer your question. Reach out for the support. Ask for help. Scroll down into the show notes. And they're all hooked up with their websites. They're ready to answer those questions. Explore the work that they're doing in the world. It is powerful, important work. And of course, you're all also invited to our book launch party. It's going to be on July 8th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And I've got information down below. I'm going to be gathering with all of the Caregivers Advocate authors. We're going to do some fun giveaways that day. So come on down for the link for that. And if you happen to be listening to this interview anytime after that July date, that just means you can hop over to Amazon and grab your copy of this amazing book, you guys. Lastly, today, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So it's time to be brave. See you next time, everyone.